Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and this is a new video for the Libertarian View, this Libertarian channel, YouTube channel. Now again, if you want to contribute to this Libertarian YouTube channel, please do contact me. I want this channel to be somewhere where all Libertarians can contribute to and have their thoughts on, so contact me here on YouTube, or look me up on like Facebook or my website, alexmerced.com. Okay, so what we're doing in this video is we're going to talk about libertarian ethics and ideas, so just different a lot of the foundational ideas that have to do with like sort of the libertarian way of thinking. Now, probably the central principle of libertarian thinking is what's called the non-aggression principle. This is sort of you can kind of think of it as a more detailed version of the golden rule. Do unto others what you want done to yourself, which is you want people to sort of respect your autonomy. And the way the rule goes is basically you can do whatever you want as long as you don't affect somebody or you don't aggress upon somebody else. So if you initiate force against somebody else or their property, so that would fall under, if I hit you, if I steal your stuff, that is an aggression on your property. I am initiating force on your property. That would be unjust. Although I would be just not to initiate force against you, but to retaliate with force if you initiate force upon me. So it's all about you have the right to defend yourself, but you don't have the right to aggress. And if no one aggressed against each other, the idea is that everyone would be okay. So basically you have the right to do whatever you want with your stuff, but then you have to kind of make sure other people are okay with what you do with your stuff. Behavior has to be voluntary. But if we say you and your property, what does property mean? How do libertarians define property? Because everyone understands the term property, stuff that you own, and property rights, but there's different ways of looking at property rights and what is justly acquired property, meaning stuff that you have that you got the right way. Sometimes you get things the wrong way. If you steal them from somebody else, that's not justly acquired property. So generally, the way libertarians look at it is you have something called the homesteading theory. And the way the homesteading theory works is that let's say there's something that nobody owns. Like no one's ever said, I own this before. So it's like, let's a big field of land. What you could do is you could take a piece of it and build a fence around it. Now by building that fence, you have took your labor and mixed it with that sort of unclaimed good, and now that piece of the property is now yours, okay? And this is by nature, in a legal sense, true, because no one would be able to establish a prior claim. No one's going to be able to say that they mixed their labor with you before anybody else, before you, because no one had. It was completely unused and unclaimed. Okay, you can't necessarily homestead something that's already owned, because once it's owned, once it becomes an individual's property, the only way for you to get that property is to have them voluntarily exchange it with you. Whether you do it through a purchase, they give you money in exchange for the property, or they decide to give it to you as a gift, or you inherit it. Those are all sort of voluntary and just forms of transfers, of property transfers. Unjust transfers is like stealing it, or if the government were to just sort of repossess your property and give it to somebody else. These would be sort of unjust transfers. Okay, and it gets more detailed than that, but that's the basic gist of how sort of libertarians look at property. And your property includes your life. So the fact that you're alive, if someone kills you, they're damaging your property, your body, everything. And generally we look at everything as a property rights issue. Contracts. Now, in helping respect people's sort of autonomy and encouraging voluntary cooperation, you need contracts. Okay? Not everyone trusts everybody, and sometimes it's nice to have a piece of paper that says this is the terms that we agreed to for this voluntary arrangement. But a good legal system would not only allow people to enter contracts, but also has to enforce them. So the idea is that if someone breaks a contract with you that they voluntarily entered with you, that there's legal recourse, that you can go, wait a second, you signed this contract, we both agreed to the terms, and now you have to meet your end of the deal. Okay, and generally this, by the nature that a legal system enforces enforceable contracts, and that gets a little bit more complicated, that's how good a legal system is. So for example, like a lot of libertarians in some veins would argue, I think like Robert Nozick, he originally argued in Anarchy to State Utopia that even if someone voluntarily decided to become your slave, that would be a contract that can be honored. I think later on in his life he changed his mind. So there's a lot of debate among libertarians about what's a just contract, what kind of things can you really voluntarily give up? Can you voluntarily give up your freedom? Are you free to not be free in a sense? Now, no one can take away your freedom by force. No one can sit there and say you are now. That would be unjust. If someone just said you are my slave and that's that, you have no choice in the matter. You would have to. You would have to consent on libertarian terms. That's sort of. But again, there's a lot of debate over things like that and other. Whether that is a just contract or not, or an enforceable contract. Negative rights. Now, a philosopher by the name of Isaiah Berlin, he discussed the idea of negative and positive liberty. Now, the difference between a negative liberty and a positive liberty is a negative liberty is sort of a right that you have without having to force anybody else to work to give it to you. So if I say the right to free speech, you don't have to force anyone to do anything for you to exercise your right to free speech. The right to your property, like your life and your right to your life, no one else has to do anything for you to just be alive. Okay, no one's obligated to grant you those rights. Those rights are just sort of inherent. That's a negative right. Okay. So libertarians sort of believe that there's only negative rights. Positive rights aren't really rights; those are entitlements. Now, a positive right would be like when you say that someone has a right to education. Okay, now you may want people to have an education, but when you say there's a right to an education, you're saying that there is a positive obligation on other individuals to provide that person with an obligation, and it's not just a moral one. You're saying that they're legally obligated. When you say it's a right, that they're somehow intrinsically obligated to provide that person with that thing. Okay, and because otherwise there'd be there's no way to, let's say, attain education without some other individual, somewhat voluntary or involuntary performing services. So same thing with like right to healthcare, so right to all sorts of other things. Those would be positive rights. You're saying that people should have this thing, so other people should be obligated to provide it for them. Okay, that would be a positive right. Negative right would be, again, something that you don't necessarily need other people to provide. Okay, so like a right to enter contracts. No one has to do anything for you. You choose to enter a contract, and the other person on the other side will choose to enter a contract with you. Like you have a right to try to do things, but you don't have a right to do things in a sense. So that'd be more sort of a distinction there. Okay. Evictionism. This is more of a niche libertarian idea. First developed by an awesome economist by the name of Walter Block. If you haven't read his book, Defending the Undefendable, it's probably one of the most entertaining libertarian reads possible, because basically what he does, he tries to go into all these different persons who you wouldn't necessarily think as the best people in the world, like gamblers, prostitutes, pimps, etc., and explains how they actually provide a benefit to society and the economy and whatnot. It's actually a really fun read. And I think he's coming out with a couple sequels over the next couple years. But evictionism is Walter Block's attempt to find a middle ground in sort of the debate, the pro-life, pro-choice debate. So you have two sides of the debate. You have pro-choice, who basically focused on the right of the woman over her body, because her body is her property, and she has property rights, and she does not have to allow someone to be on her property, aka the fetus. So in that case, she's has her right to not carry the child. But then there's the right to life argument, is that the fetus is an individual. Okay, now at what point does it become an individual? That's a contentious debate, whether it's at the moment of conception, whether it's at the first heartbeat. There's different people who have different points of view on that. But the point is that once it becomes an individual, if you were to destroy the fetus, then you are taking its life, you are destroying its property, so you are violating the child's property rights. So the question is, so the debate always becomes who's willing to violate whose property rights. Are you willing to violate the woman's property rights and force her to carry the child, or are you going to violate the fetus's property rights and destroy it? Okay, so Walter Block was trying to come up with sort of a middle ground, saying, well, the woman does have a right to her body. She can remove the trespasser from her property, but just because she can remove the trespasser from her property doesn't mean she has to destroy the trespasser. So in the sense that if you can remove the fetus, and the fetus can kind of survive on its own, then basically then the fetus should remain alive. You shouldn't actively destroy the fetus after you've removed it. Now, if you remove the fetus and the thing can't live on its own, then technically, I think depending on how there's different interpretations of the whole evictionist idea. There's a couple of lectures on YouTube of Walter Block discussing this. Some people look at it where, like the way I personally look at it is when you have a situation where the fetus isn't viable, it becomes a little bit more complex because you do have a genuine property rights conflict. So that generally more complicated property rights conflicts should be handled by a court system to figure out whose property rights, how to retain both parties' property rights as best as possible. Okay, by having an impartial judge. And but I think, as far as my understanding goes, of sort of the main line here is that if you remove the fetus and it can't survive on its own, that's not necessarily the woman's fault. But if the fetus can live on its own and she still decides to terminate it, then you're sort of crossing a boundary there. So it's sort of a weird, like, gray area. That's the whole point of evictionism, to find that sort of middle ground between pro-life and pro-choice. Sort of a more a sort of a pure libertarian, a pure libertarian way of looking at it, by looking at from a property rights point of view. So these are a whole bunch of different libertarian ideals and ethics and whatnot, so you can get an idea better of how libertarians think. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. This is from the Libertarian View channel. Have a great day and enjoy.